Part 2 is Naaman, the pleasant and delightful man. That's what the word Naaman means. Naaman. Now, Naaman was a very good, honorable, and presentable man who suffered from leprosy. He was the best a non-believer could be as a man. And for what the flesh can achieve as far as obedience and righteousness went. And that led to the biggest crisis point in his life. Could he release his pride and obey God from the voice of a prophet of God that was an enemy of Syria? You know, that was a big thing in his mind. And Naaman's troubles didn't begin with his leprosy. See, Naaman's wife began to trouble him, and so did her servant, because they ganged up on him and forced him to go to the king to ask permission to go to Israel. You understand that? It wasn't in his heart to go until his wife and her servant decided that he was going to go. And, you know, he wasn't too sure he wanted to go, because he'd have to ask the king. Now, in 2 Kings 5:3, it says, "And she said to her mistress, I desire that my master was able to go before the prophet of God who resides in Samaria, that he would be cured, so that he would cure him of his leprosy." So that he could be cured of it. And see, when you're sort of policing a nation that is hostile to you, you don't want to go begging somebody in that nation. So with pressure from both of them, Naaman went to the king for permission to see the prophet in Israel. Thus a letter was sent to the king of Israel from the king of Syria. Now this put great pressure on the king of Israel, because he didn't say he was coming to see the prophet. He was sending him to get cured by the king of Israel. Well, this was a lot of pressure there when the king of Israel read the letter. He was devastated. Who am I, God, he says? Huh? But because there was faith that this prophet had contact with God from the mistress's servant and this guy's wife, he had no choice but to go. Okay? They had the faith, and they moved the mountain. They moved the king. Then in verse 8, Elisha, the man of God, sends a message to the king, because the king received this letter and he's just totally distraught. He rips his clothes, he runs around naked all day saying, woe is me, what can I do? Okay? So Elisha sends this message and says, why have you torn your clothes? Now allow Naaman to come to me, and he shall be a truthful witness that there is a prophet of God in Israel. Now the king was fighting Elisha. He didn't want Elisha bringing the people back to Judah for the feast days, especially the spring feast days. Now, the king of Israel was resisting and fighting God and would not allow Israel to keep the Sabbath days, nor the feast days of God. He needed a reminder of the power of God and the mercy of God. The king was all too happy to pass this Naaman problem over to Elisha. Well, what seems impossible for man is not impossible for God. Now, here comes the test every Christian and believer must pass. There's a series of them here. Elisha would not see Naaman face to face. And now we see the test in verses 9 and 10. In verse 9 it says, So Naaman came with his horses and his chariots, and he stood at the doorway of the house of Elijah. Really? To go see a prophet, you have to bring all your horses and chariots and armed guards? Really? Yeah. So the first test is coming in pomp and power to see God, or carrying a demand to God. It's like the Pharisee and the tax collector that Jesus talked about. One stayed humbly back and confessed, and the other was a pompous ass. He says, "Oh, I'm glad you didn't make me like other men." Okay? Well, that's a very pompous approach to things. The second was to see if Naaman was too proud to submit to the authority given to the prophet of God. And often, because there's a rebellion to the prophet of God, the people of God suffer in poverty over it. Or they're not healed. Or this is open for attack and that's open for attack. So, recognizing the authority that's given by God to a man or woman as a prophet is very important. Now in verse 10, and Elijah sent a message to him saying, by a lowly servant, not the lead servant, a lowly servant. It says, go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored to you, and you shall be clean. Returning of life. Well, this was the springtime of the year. The Jordan is high. It is a very dirty river. Okay. It is not the thing that you look at and says, ooh, you know. So, test number 3 is to prove whether you're too proud to obey a lowly servant of the prophet of God. And sometimes a person will be asking for something and the prophet will get a message and has somebody else deliver it. And you'll say, well, I'm not going to accept that. I got to pray. I got to go talk to the prophet myself to verify this. Whoa, bad news. Because you know, You just removed your protection, and you just removed the thing you were seeking. You moved it right out of the reach. Can be held till after. Item number 4 is having false expectations that pride must protect you, and that you must protect your pride. Demanding from the emotional heart an emotional pleasing solution. You see, what was said to him was not emotionally pleasing. If he would say, go back to a river of Syria and bathe in the beautiful clean water there, oh, that would have been no problem. But he knew that this water comes down and contains the sewage. The spring runoff. It smells like sheep dung and cow dung has been washed down in it. It's not a pleasant smell, the Jordan River in the spring. But you know, it is a very strong de-leavening agent.
Right.
5 is fighting the promises of God with human reasoning. As soon as you get human reasoning involved, right away, it ups the pride, decreases the ability to obey, and then you get angry because God didn't do it your way. And number 6, maintaining false doctrines, pagan doctrines, and other types of doctrines of demons in order to make demands on and for the glory and, shall we say, self-controlled power the power that you possess as a physical being on God, thinking that you can move God by your own glory. Why do you think he came with all those horses or not? He was showing off his glory. His power was at stake here. And when the men that were with him heard that he was to bathe 7 times in this filthy Jordan River, oh, wow. You know, that was, his pride couldn't handle that. What are his men going to think? What if this gets back to the king? So, in verse 11, but Naaman was furious and went away, and he went away with great anger in him. And then said, behold, I thought he will surely come out to me. Look at all this fine chariots and stuff I brought with me to show my glory. And surely he would stand before me, face to face, and then call on the name of the eternal his God, and wave his hand over this place, and cure me, the leper. What did you see in all that?
All about me.
Okay. Well, the 7th test is the pride of meisms that change to I-isms. You see, he used, I thought he will give me special honor and give this honor to me. Okay? I thought he will come out to me. Look how important I am. You know, I got a letter from the king to come here. I'm important. Not only from my king, but from your king. You see? And I thought he would stand before me, treat me as an equal before God. But he wasn't at this point in time. And a leper was unclean. You weren't supposed to touch them and go near them. And a prophet of God knew that. And then he goes, I thought he would call on his God so that his God could see me. Look at me. Yeah. And finally, like he said, I thought he would perform a ceremonial rite to make me feel good and cure me. Well, we can do that too. Routine prayers. Ritualisms that don't mean anything to God. Much wordiness going on with the prayer, on and 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 on some more. Not good. Much words, turn God off. Just shut him. He just doesn't hear. And test number 8 is, will anger rage rule when pride flares, or will we control it and keep saying no to it? Well, Naaman may have been pleasant to look at, except for the leprosy that was affecting his feet and hands. His face was beautiful, according to what history says of him. He was a well-shaped man. Had his six-pack all in a row for everybody to see. And then came another test to Naaman, as seen in verse 13. You see, he went away in a huff. He was mad. He was cursing that prophet, cursing Israel, and was going to go back and then, convince the king to invade Israel again and kill everybody. Mass genocide because of what just happened. Then verse 13. Then his loyal servants came near and spoke to him. And one said, my father, that was one of his sons, had the prophet of God told you to do some great or dangerous thing, would you not have done it? How much more merciful than that, when all demands that the prophet said and says to you is this: wash and be clean. Is that too difficult? Is that really such a problem? Wash and be clean? Repent and be baptized. And most people say, no, I won't be baptized. What if I get wet? Well, test number 9 is, when nourishing anger rage, will we even bother to have sound reasoning come into us from someone that you consider as less important or not as important as yourself? Now, apparently the first son was never a servant of his father, but any follow-up sons that could not inherit the main estate were considered servants to the father because they couldn't inherit the estate. But we see that Naaman went to the Jordan and washed 7 times in the river. Some proclaim it was he just dipped himself down up to his neck because he didn't want to get his face dirty. But the word that is used is washed, which means he completely submersed and rubbed the water onto him, as a cleansing process. This was probably the first day of unleavened bread when this event happened. It was the spring, the feast time. The river, as I said earlier, was very muddy and unacceptable. But he went and did it. And in Naaman's next test, it came is described in verse 15. When he returned to the man of God with all his company as a witness, he came and stood before Elijah, and he said, Behold, now I know that there is no other God in all the earth but in Israel. Do you get what he just said? There is no other God in all of Israel, or all the world, but the God of Israel, the God of the believers. Okay? So take a present from your servant now. He came as a master demanding and now he comes as a servant. Just what a change. What a change in spirit. In verse 16, but Elisha said, O the Eternal lives before whom I stand, I will take nothing. And he was urged by Naaman to take something, but he stood firm and refused. Now, the 10th test is, can you keep your peace when your gift or your knowledge or your love or your discernment is turned down? Maybe it's turned down by a non-believer or a fellow believer. And when you are hated for wanting to give, how do you handle that? Now, there was a reason why Elisha had to turn down that gift. It was unclean. The gold and the silver had been dedicated to idols. It was in the possession of the demons of sicknesses. He did not want it. But God had told him not to accept it, not to allow it in the camp. So, what we have to look at, when we go to help somebody and they turn us down, what's our state of mind?
Rejection.
You feel rejected. But why? They're rejecting God, not you.
But you were so hopeful in your soul.
It tells you what they think of you, too. I don't respect you as somebody who has discernment or understanding. You are just a nothing.
We're an extension of...
My emotions, that what they're saying is my emotional state is more important than all your wisdom.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, the washing of 7 times represents the falling down in your walk with Jesus. Yet, in obedience, miracles occur. Healings occur, favor is shown, and prosperity flows to you. So, as long as you're unwilling to obey, because you got to do it your way on your emotional state, these things can't flow to you. It took 7 washings to let the light of God remove Naaman's self-righteous darkness. 7 washings just to remove that particular item. 7 inflows of life.